As part of Sky's partnership with Internet Matters, we have started a podcast series that discusses crucial topics around keeping your children safe online. This is the second episode of the series, which is centred around Safer Internet Day and provides advice on making space for conversations with children about life online. Your hosts today are Goodwin, an LGBTQ+ champion at Sky, and Jackie Woodham from Parents at Sky. They'll be joined by Ghislaine Bombusa, the Head of Digital at Internet Matters.
Hey guys, I'm Graham. I'm part of the LGBTQ+ champion network at Sky. I'm here with Jackie from Parents at Sky and Ghislaine from Internet Matters. And we're here today to talk about Safer Internet Day. So to start off with, Ghislaine, could you please tell us what Safer Internet Day is and what it means at Internet Matters?
Well, yeah, thank you, Graham. So we at Internet Matters, this is the calendar moment for us in terms of thinking about online safety. And Safer Internet Day celebrates its 20th year this year. And the key theme around that they kind of coalesce really around is all about want to talk about it, making space for conversation about life online. And just the premise of Safer Internet Day is all about promoting safe, responsible and positive use of digital technology for children and young people. So this year it's all about putting children's voices at the heart. So for us as parents is really taking the time to listen to them, to really give them the moment to kind of talk to them about all their online experiences, what they love, what they are concerned about, what they want us to help them with. And as an organization, we support parents primarily, but also professionals, carers as well. But we create a lot of information about what children are doing, what are the things that they may be experiencing, but also how you as a parent can really have a positive impact in their digital world and give them those tools to make those right choices when they are, surfing and exploring and doing all the great things that the internet can offer them. As part of this, the conversation topic, we've created a number of tips, I guess you can call them, to really help you to have those conversations. And as parents, we all have conversations with our children, talking about a whole range of things from schoolwork to all kinds of things. But I think when it comes to online safety, it can be one of those topics that you only talk about when there's an issue or where you feel like they're spending too much time on screen time. So you'll be like, don't get off that device. But actually, it's really important to have those conversations and make them part of your everyday. And we say Internet Matters, Safer Internet Day for us is every day, because online safety is really what we live for. So what I'd like you to do is just to kind of run you through what those 5 tips are. And again, for parents who are, have preschoolers, to parents who have teenagers who are really good at all things technology and may feel a bit awkward when you're talking to them about all the different things they're doing that you don't know about. This really covers all of those types of parents. So the first thing we would say is to make it easy for them to talk. So creating those moments, finding those moments in the day where you can kind of have those conversations, and they don't need to be like, okay, now we're going to have an online safety conversation. It could be on the way to school, in the car, just raising an issue. You'd be like, oh, I heard about Fortnite's launching a new chapter, what do you think about it? Or you've been on that TikTok, can you tell me a little bit? It could just be asking them to tell them something about the things that they're exploring. So rather than it being, oh, you shouldn't be doing this or you shouldn't be doing that, or I'm concerned about this, it's just giving them the space and finding that space for them to do it when you're in that one-to-one setting. It could be during their bedtime routine if you've got a younger child and you're going through the motions, and just asking a little bit about, oh, what did you enjoy, what did you look at online, what did you watch, what was good about it, and just making those moments feel a bit more natural in terms of creating those moments. The second thing you can do is do a little bit of research about what are the things that children may be experiencing at different ages and stages. As Internet Matters, we really organize our content around what ages they are. So from the 0 to 5s to the preteens and then the teens. So just finding out about what are those platforms that the children of those ages are using. What are the issues that they may be seeing because they're using those different platforms, and just understanding a little bit more. So when you're having those conversations, they're a little bit more informed. So you're not coming in as like, oh, tell me all about it, but just starting off with something that you kind of learned about, maybe through us as an organization, going to our website, internetmatters.org, or just, as with other parents sharing what you guys are concerned about, and then building your knowledge around that. So doing a little bit of research before the conversation, that we think is quite important. And just leading on from that is just trying to start the conversation out right. So if you've got that insight about your child may be a gamer, they love watching, let's play videos, which are gaming videos, or they love, a particular influencer, just knowing a bit of the lingo so you can go in a little bit more prepared. So it may be that you say it wrong and they laugh at you and they're like, Mum, what are you talking about? And then they go into some.
If you called it the TikTok or
Yeah.
the TikTok or the Snapchat, it's like, come on, get with the times. It's kind of like you just got to kind of make sure, or like even my wife's dad calls Spotify the Spotify,
Yeah.
which I find hilarious. But it's finding
Yeah.
those moments of joy and laughter to try and tackle a tough subject.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to know everything, but just a little bit helps to get that conversation started out right. And then the fourth thing is a little bit more tricky, but tackling those tricky topics. Like, I think one of the most tricky topics, I think, for most parents, is I've heard it is all about online pornography, inappropriate content, adult content. How do you even begin to kind of say this is what you might stumble across if you go to, well, sometimes it might be just a pop-up, but just trying to kind of make sure that the pornographer is not the first person that tells your child about sex education. So you being that foundation, and obviously there's age appropriate conversation as they grow and develop, but actually just making sure you start the conversation rather than it being started before you have time to just lay that foundation.
That was even on the news yesterday. So they were saying that a lot of, even as young as 9-year-olds, are kind of finding that kind of content on platforms that you kind of think are safe, like your Twitters and your Snapchat and your TikToks, and just trying to make them aware and not go down that horrific rabbit hole, because obviously you want to keep their innocence there for as long as possible, and not finding out kind of those things through those kind of medias.
Exactly. Or if you are concerned about it and there are maybe might stumble across it, and say, just give them that knowledge that you might see something that may be more adult, and if you do, these are the things that you should do immediately, so that at least they've got some kind of tools and resilience to think, okay, well, I know my mum told me that this might come up, so let me shut that down, tell her that's happened, let's put some controls on board, and just to make sure they don't experience that again. And then if they've got questions about it, to kind of tackle them in an age appropriate way. And then the last thing, the fifth point, is all about learning together. Again, your child might know a lot about the platform, but not necessarily how to make the smart choices about what they do. You might not know a lot about the platform, but and so learning together, coming on that journey together. So we've got a few tools on the website, interactive quizzes that you can do together, just to garner that conversation and actually go on the journey together to learn and to grow together. Because ultimately, I think that's where we see, as far as our research says, where they have the better outcomes. So when you're doing things together, when you're learning together, that will help them in terms of the way that they then do independent searches and how they kind of make sure that they stay safe online. So those are the 5 top tips, I guess, we've kind of identified as far as having the conversation. But one thing we know is parents as a general is not a homogenized group. There are different settings, and again, your child, but I think it's just making sure that you make it important to have, on top of all the conversation you're having those online safety conversations, to make sure that they understand their online world a little bit better, and that you are also curious about what they're doing and engaged in what they're doing. So I think,
and I think, like, as parents, it's quite hard to keep on top of, isn't it? Because there's so many different trends and places to go, and it's just, I suppose, like, your website is a great tool for people to go in and learn about this kind of thing. For maybe that aren't so clued up.
Yes, and I think it's really,
I think we kind of all take it for granted that we've kind of grown up with this tech. I mean, I don't understand TikTok at all. Don't get it. I don't really want to join it either. I struggle enough with working Instagram. And I've grown up with tech. I've worked in tech for 20 years. So there are going to be people who aren't as au fait or as used to dealing with mobiles or dealing with an iPad or a Samsung tablet, etc. And I think being able to upskill yourself is kind of one of those major things that we all need to do and all take responsibility for.
Absolutely. And I think for parents, we know there's a lot of demands on your time, and we know it can be quite difficult to fit in another thing. But I think if you think about the all-encompassing online world for children, they don't see online and offline, they see just life. The way that they connect with their friends, that's a continuation when they do it online, and the communication that they have. So I think for us as parents is making sure that we make the time for things that is important to our kids that they're doing. So I think, as you say, informing yourself about those things. And sometimes parents do, worry that, oh, I don't know all about this, I can't talk about it. But you know more than you think, in terms of you've got so many skills. Some of the things that we teach them about crossing the road, about doing all that, can be applied to some of the things that they do online. So whilst we kind of give them phone and let them do what they do, really we do need to guide them through that. We do need to take the time to say, well, okay, don't think you're quite ready for that, so let's have a conversation about when you're ready, or let's learn together about what are those safety things that you need to do in order to communicate safely, in order to connect to the right people, in order to set up create a safe space online for you to kind of explore. So I think there's an element of us, almost like we use this analogy around riding. When you're teaching your child to ride a bike, you don't just let them go in a big bike with 2 wheels. You kind of have the training wheels. You put the training wheels on, you hold the seat, you get them to do that, and then once they get comfortable with doing that, you take off the training wheels, and then but you're still behind them, you're still watching them, you're still giving you that guidance. And it's similar to what you should be doing online.
I did a Peloton ride this morning, because fitness first thing, and the ending quote to think about was, practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes improvements. And that's kind of, I really enjoyed that quote. I don't know where it came from, but I think that really resonates. Practice makes improvements. And if we're all practicing these things and learning about things like Twitch and Discord and all those various different sort of platforms, especially for gamers as well, because kids love gaming at the moment.
Yes.
You were saying about Fortnite. There's like these online communities, and you've got to dip your toe in a little bit. You've got to know enough to be able to sort of talk about it and be able to have that open and honest sort of conversation with those things. I also still don't know what Twitch Discord is.
Yeah, I don't know. When you're saying that, I was like, I don't even know what that is. But I suppose that, like, everything you've just said there,
Twitch is an interesting paradigm, because it's kids going on to watch other kids play computer games. It's and that's like, sometimes you get kids who don't even play the computer game themselves. They just like watching people play computer games. Which I find
kind of like
bizarre,
Gogglebox,
but
like
it's literally like Gogglebox for kids. That's probably a really good way to explain what Twitch is. It's just it's people watching other people watch stuff. I mean, it's Twitch version. What's the film Inception, isn't it, where it's all just kind of all around and whatnot. It's just everywhere. But yeah.
I suppose all of those like analogies are quite good, and I suppose that makes it important for us as parents to start it as young as possible, because then we're just normalizing it from an early age to make the conversations more comfortable to have. So I suppose a question you could kind of link that back. I know you covered it briefly, but how can we make, like, so I've got a 3-year-old, so this is a good time for me to start having these conversations really young, because she uses an iPad. So how can I start making this an easy conversation right from the start? So what environment, I know you said like before bedtime, just bring it up, but to kind of have that conversation and make it comfortable for both people, how can we make that as natural as possible?
I think if you're talking about a younger kid, so if you are like a 3-year-old, when you're giving them that iPad, sometimes it may be that you just want to keep them quiet because you're doing something else. That tends to be sometimes the reason why they're using it.
That's absolutely correct.
But it may be that you might want to just count some time together, so you're watching it together with her. So you're sitting together and you're seeing what, and as you're watching, you can ask a few questions, or what do you think about this, or whatever's happening on the screen. You can, I mean, they don't like to be interrupted sometimes, but sometimes it can be just encouraging to see what she's understanding about what she's watching, because sometimes it's really interesting. It may not be inappropriate, but it just may be that she's thinking, oh, that's real, that's fake, or that's just those tiny kind of intervention and conversation starters to just say, oh, do you think that's real, or what do you think about that? It could just be as simple as that, to start those early conversations, so that she feels like, oh, mummy is interested in what I'm interested in, and she's sitting together with me watching it. So and I mean, I just take it from my children. They, when I'm watching things together, they actually stop the video and talk to me about it. They said, "Oh, mummy, this is," they're trying to explain to me, because obviously I have no idea. So they've actually engaged. They stopped the video and engaged with me directly to say, "Mummy, this is what happens here, and I really like this," because I've asked the question, and then now they know that they can do the same to stop and tell me about it. So just having those moments are really important. And I know it's hard because there's all sorts of
it's creating.
There's only so much Peppa Pig you can watch, isn't it? So like, she'll watch it on the telly, and then when she wants to have a snack, she'll sit at the table and she'll sit and go, "Mummy, iPad," because she.
Wow.
But you know what? I don't mind, because she eats.
Right. Okay.
When she's watching the iPad.
Right.
Not for dinners and things, more just for snacks. Especially comes back from nursery and she just wants a bit of chill out time. And I'm like, do you know what? That's fine. But she's really good, so she'll sit and eat her fruit and everything. I'm like, yep, you watch the iPad if you're going to sit and eat your apples and bananas. Rather than pulling a chair up from the dining room table to the unit to climb up and get a packet of cookies or something, right?
Well,
so I think she does so. She'll be like, "Mummy, look, Peppa on the shoot," or so I suppose putting it like that's quite good, because actually it's just taking an interest really from the early age, isn't it, to then help you
just build
speak
that
about it.
exactly.
Build that conversation way, doesn't it? It kind of, you're saying this is okay to talk about, this is and making something the norm, because if that's all they ever kind of know and understand, I mean, my little boy is too, and like he's obsessed with trains and anything and everything trains. His first words in the morning are either Bix, because he wants some Weetabix. He ate 3 this morning. He's 2. Or Choo Choo for Thomas the Tank Engine. But occasionally we'll watch like real trains, like real steam trains, and I think that's kind of like a worry for me, is as he gets older, and he wants to watch these, like, I don't want him watching like a nice real steam train going across like a beautiful countryside and whatnot, going into, obviously we know how YouTube works, it will just pump up other sort of train related videos. I don't want him to see a train crash. I mean, I know on the Isle of Sodor, for Thomas the Tank Engine, the health and safety record isn't great, because there's a crash every week in that. But I don't really, I don't really want him to see an actual real train crash. Like, let's keep it animated. So yeah, it's kind of, you do worry about those things.
Yeah, and I think it's again, to your point about, you know, watching videos and then that rabbit hole going down. Oh, you know, it might get to a place where it's not intended. I think there's a few things that we can do as parents in terms of, we talk about setting parental controls, and then actually thinking about the platforms that they're using. I think, as you mentioned, YouTube Kids was born out of this whole idea of creating that curated content. So making sure that children are of different ages. So I think YouTube Kids have 3 kind of age groups that they kind of cater for. So the under 4, so I guess some of your children, and then the 5 to 7s, and then the older, they call it older group. So they use those ways to kind of filter what they think those groups would like, in terms of age groups, and it's a closed environment to a certain degree. But again, filter's not 100%, you know, they don't work 100% of the time, so that's what conversations need to happen as well, on top of, you know, setting those controls. But there
100%.
Yeah, so I think it's about the toolkit as to using, you know, what you can do, those free parent controls that you can set, but also having the conversation at the same time.
Yeah, and I think as the kids get older as well, it's like, my little boy, he likes cars as well, as in the Disney Pixar cars. And we put on the Disney kid Disney Channel, and Cars wasn't on there, so you actually had to come out of the sort of the child safe side of it to actually watch Disney's Cars, which I didn't think that had anything unage appropriate in it. But like, if you think then about the school ground, and as they get to that sort of 4 and 5, and they're talking about like the latest Disney film or whatnot, how does that kind of, like, where do you find those kind of bits of information to kind of help with that, especially kind of thinking kind of particularly around sort of online safety issues or that kind of thing? If you kind of want to leave them, if they want to watch Cars and you have to take it out of the kids mode for them to do that, then you're opening yourself up to that kind of, that they might pick something else that you don't want them to see. Or
Yeah, and I think that is the challenge. We've heard over the years where parents are like, oh, look, I've put the parental controls on, right? Done all the job. And now they're telling me they can't watch, they can't do their homework because they need to research this. And so I've got to turn them all off because they need to access this. And so there is a bit of a compromise with it. They're not perfect. I will definitely put my hand up and say they're not perfect. But I think that's why we say you need to kind of review them and see if they're still relevant. For example, your example of Disney's Cars, again, that's a bit of an outlier where you're like, oh, that's weird. So that shouldn't really happen. But where there are there's going to be moments like that where there's things that are just a bit out there. So for example, mine started using YouTube Kids, and then it's like, well, mummy, I can't see all the influencers I want to watch, so I need to use YouTube, the big YouTube, because all kids want to use what you're using. They don't want to use the child-friendly version because they feel like they're missing out on something. They're like, well, what, mummy's one is so much better. It's like, when you have a new phone, I want to use your phone. I don't want to use my one. So there's an element of then looking at those platforms and thinking, okay, if you're going to let them on, explore what controls you can put on and what the limitations are, so you're aware of that. It's again informing yourself about the potentials of what could happen and what they could see.
Yeah. Are there sort of specialised resources for parents that identify online safety issues that are kind of more commonly experienced by LGBT sort of plus children?
Yeah, so we, I think a year and a half ago, we partnered with Southwest Good for Learning to create a platform of resources for LGBTQ plus parents and carers and professionals who are, supporting them. And we created a range of resources that kind of talk about what things that they may experience differently to other groups, and what things you can do in order to support them, and what challenges that they may be doing online, the different aspects of what they may be doing, that will be opening them to more risk. And based on our research, we know that they're more at risk because of the fact that they're identifying as that and part of that group. So we've got a range of kind of a whole guide, from videos to downloadable guides that you can use to really think about how are they connecting and sharing, how are they browsing, what are the things that those based on activities that they do, and what are the things that you can do to make sure that you keep them safe, or you talk to them about having those conversations about, if you are exploring your sexuality online, where do you need to go, what are the resources that are safe, that you should be using, as opposed to some of the other ones that may not necessarily give you the right information. So those kind of things are what you can use on our website, to make sure that you inform yourself before you have the conversation, and then keep those conversations going as they develop and grow and explore them further online.
That sounds great. So you've got quite a lot of stuff covered on your website then. So I think when you talked about that scenario, is that kind of broken down into different age brackets as well?
We've kind of done it as a catch-all, but again, within
right.
that, you have a bit of a, these are the age appropriate conversation that you should have. Essentially, if there are,
Yeah.
9, exploring and not quite sure, what are the things that you can talk about, versus someone who is maybe older in their teenage, and what potentially they'll be looking to do in terms of dating, and all the things that come with growing older and exploring that sexuality. What does that look like? So there are key advice around that as well.
Yeah, so that kind of links into another question then, just when you said like dating, because I don't even want to think about that for my daughter because she's way too young, right? But actually one day that'll come. So as children get older, what's the kind of different dangers that we should be kind of looking out for, the changes?
Yes,
because it's obviously going to change from young children to as they get older. So
yeah, I mean, again, it's like as I've seen I've got an 8-year-old and now near enough 12-year-old, so I've got that broad range of that in between ages, and I can see that definitely it feels as though, well, from the research that we've done, like a lot of children are doing things earlier. So whereas, let's say 5 years ago, they may not have been using particular platforms, they're now quickly kind of using those and getting more afraid with them, like the WhatsApps of the world. More children, younger children, using those platforms, messaging platforms, where what we see is contact risk. So where there may be opportunities for grooming, there may be opportunities for cyberbullying, all those kind of contact risks kind of increase when you start using those social media platforms. So I would say those are the ones that increase, but at the heart of it, the content risk, so what they see essentially is what changes. So as they get explore more and look at different topics and start to kind of explore beyond that closed environment, and you give them more access to things, those content risks will increase, like seeing violent content, seeing inappropriate content, adult content. So those are the risks that will increase. So having the conversation about those risks as they get older and building the understanding about how to deal with those risks putting those, as we talked about, those filters in place, thinking about what they're doing and sharing on those platforms is important. And then when it comes to those contact risks, it's all about communication. How are they communicating with each other? How are they building their friendship groups? And then relaying that back online. Because a lot of the time when we hear from teachers, they're like, well, a lot of what happens is that they'll come into school, they'll be friends, and then something happens online, and then it actually has an impact in their real world because someone said something that they shouldn't, or they made a joke about something, and it becomes a whole issue. So I think those elements of making sure that you help them to think about how they're communicating. We have this guy called internet manners. So what are the things that how you should not be spamming your friends kind of feed, and how you're typing out your words and all that kind of stuff is really important as they get older, and dealing with those the misunderstandings that come with communicating online.
I think it goes back to what we said earlier. It's having that open and honest conversation as soon as kind of people can or kids can start to understand it, really, and just making sure that that conversation isn't like a flash in a pan. That's something that you revisit constantly, and if you're creating that sort of open and safe sort of allyship in your home, then that will that will exponentially grow, and I think that's so important, especially in the computer social media world that we now live in. I think gone are the days as a kid I used to walk 2-3 miles to my friend's house, knock on the door to see if they were in, and if they weren't in, you just had to walk 2-3 miles back. I think those days are gone. I think everything is done. Like if someone knocks your door now, you're like, well, no one's texted me to say they're coming. So it's kind of, we've got to kind of understand, and we've got to kind of make sure that we're really bringing this into the home conversation, and not being afraid to talk about difficult subjects, and making sure as parents, for any parent or any setup at home, that we've got access to the right resources and we know where to find them. I think that's so important, and it's fantastic that we've got this massive resources that we can utilize. I think that's really, really key and important.
Absolutely. And again, as you say, utilizing that and understanding the differences. You say, you completely kind of touched on something. For us as parents, it was a whole different ball game when you talked about communicating with each other. And even now, one story I had where my daughter was like, oh, why don't I see all your friends? I used to see it because now she's at secondary school, I don't really know all her friends, whereas when she was at primary school, I kind of knew the group, but now I have absolutely no idea because she's communicating online, and it's kind of like why don't you invite them around? No, Mum, we're just doing Zoom, or we're just doing, like, it's just a different way of communicating that I'm having.
A lot of friendships are based around social media and just chatting. Like, I know me, like, I don't ever meet up with my friends because we've got busy lives and it's hard to get us all together. But every day we're chatting to each other through group chats or Snapchat or Facebook or something like that. So it's not just kids, it's like as adults.
So in your opinion, what do you think are the trickiest topics of internet safety, both kind of generically and also for the LGBTQ plus community as well?
I think primarily it's going to be about any contact risk. So where it comes to where your child is communicate with something and something goes wrong. So primarily the type of thing where it's around online hate, and then you're talking about online grooming, cyberbullying, those contact risk where you are engaging with somebody else and something's coming back at you, or you're seeing something that is targeted at you. So those are probably the biggest, more that are going to have probably more impact on your child, because it's directly directed at them or friends or people that are there around. And that would probably apply for the LGBTQ plus community as well, because in terms of, if you're thinking about sharing your experience as LGBTQ plus person, and then you get all the hate or something negative coming towards you, and how you deal with that. So I think those are, I would say, probably the trickiest things as a parent to kind of deal with. We've heard all about the cyberbullying stories and how that kind of transpires online, and how that can lead to mental health issues and all those kind of things. So those contact risks, I would say, are probably the trickiest things to tackle with your child.
See, just on the back of that, actually, so what if as a parent you're uncomfortable to have those conversations? Like, what is there any advice you could give to anyone to make them have that conversation where they do feel more comfortable? Or
I think
Because I know there's a
any
lot of subjects that people are uncomfortable talking about. So it's just how can it make it easier for them to have that conversation as a parent?
I think as a parent, when we are uncomfortable, it's probably because we don't know a lot about it, or we're like, we feel like, it's a bit awkward in terms of bringing it up. So I think the first thing I would say is just get informed about it. Do as much reading around it as you can to kind of really feel like you know a little bit, or as much as you think it would be relevant for you to start that conversation. I think the other onus is that if your child is online or is communicating, there's an onus on you to swallow that awkwardness and actually take the lead and talk to them, because if you're letting them on the WhatsApps, the Facebooks, the Twitter, the Instagram, and all these platforms where they are either sharing information, sharing their experiences, taking on other people's experiences, there is an onus on you as a parent to say, look, I need to inform myself, and I also need to kind of start this conversation. And it doesn't have to be where you start out saying, cyberbully. It could just be like, can you tell me a little bit of how you're using, Instagram? Who are you talking to? It could just be as simple as that. And then you can start that as a starting point to then build out, oh, have you received anything that, in the comments? Because a lot of it is in the comments, isn't it? Like where you post something is in the comments. Does it
Or
feel
even on the stories, stories as well. It's like we went to like some steam trains, because the boy's obsessed with choo-choos, at the weekend, and you put something nice on your story, and obviously you can either lock your Instagram profile down so it's just friends that see it, or if they're open, etc. And even some of the people, obviously, because people want to know how many people have viewed my story and all of that, and even some of the people that have viewed your story, it's actually inappropriate content, because if they clicked on those people who have viewed it, it can take them to adult content, adult material. So it is a worry, because from all communities, you can really, really see how quickly you can go down like a rabbit hole and find stuff that's going to be potentially damaging.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing about when you are engaging online, and children are using these platforms more and more, and how they're actually using it, and what kind of either content filters that you put in to make sure that people are not sending you weird messages, as you said, talked about shutting down your account so only your friends see it, and think about your friends list. If you've got younger kids and you're posting about your children, I think you should be doing the work to make sure that's a protected list of people who have access to what you're sharing about your children. All of those things are really important to do to make sure that, as you say, you don't allow people who are not necessarily, friendly online, or may lead your child down the rabbit hole of seeing things that they shouldn't. So you're protecting that. It doesn't always work. So there are going to be moments where things get in, but at least you've done that work to create that environment.
Yeah,
100%.
no, that's great. Right, so I volunteered to come on this podcast, Ghislaine, because I need some inside info and I need some help.
Right.
So, as you know, I've got a 3-year-old. And do you know what? This is relevant. This will not just be relevant to me, it'll be relevant to absolutely loads of people. So that's why I want to bring it up. But my 3-year-old uses iPad. She watches things. She clicks on things. I personally currently do not have any settings on this iPad, because I don't know what I'm doing, right? So I know I don't currently use YouTube Kids. I've just got a normal YouTube, so I probably should switch to YouTube Kids. But how do I go about setting up this iPad to make it as safe as I can for her? And no one else uses this iPad. This is just an old iPad that she has, so it's technically hers. So how can I go about or find information the best to get help to set this up? Because I've never had to bother about settings before. It's just been me and my husband, so we've never bothered about stuff like that. So I'm a bit clueless, and I've never really looked into it. So I'm sure there's hundreds of other people out there exactly the same situation. So what advice can you give me and everyone else?
So there's a few things. So I think that there's a few things of where you want to set the controls and how you want to do it. So it could be that you start from your Sky broadband, if you've got Sky broadband, or you've got, I presume you do, but if you don't, if you're from your broadband provider.
I do indeed.
So you can start there, and they have a whole range of ways, because I think we've been funded by all the broadband providers, but they have a range of ways to set things up so you can restrict the kind of content. So in terms of websites, the kind of content that you can have access from your broadband directly. So it doesn't even have to be your device, you can just do it from your broadband provider. If you want to then have a bit more control over some of the other things, you know, screen time, how long she spends on it, all the things, there's device specific tools that you can use on iPad. So there's there's a screen time app that you can use to go into there to set, you know, what apps can she download or can't she download, age specific, how long can she spend on the tablet, when can she turn it on, when does it turn off. All of that is accessible from device centric. And then there's down to the app or platform specific advice, like if you are going to be using YouTube, there's things you can do on YouTube to make sure that it's a supervised account. So setting her up with a supervised account as opposed to just your account, which is linked to your account. So you're creating her own account so that you can differentiate it from yours and then set some controls so that she can only see specific type of content. What I would advise for you, your specific situation, is that you actually get her on YouTube Kids. It's just a little bit safer, and there's a lot more that you can control there. And you can actually choose approved content. So you can go in, set her up with her own account. Once you've all done that, it links to your parent account, and then approve specific types of content. So when she's in that mode, she will only watch channels and collections essentially that you've approved. Now, all of this requires investment, and I'm not going to lie, it's going to take maybe half an hour of your time to kind of think about and set up, and then it's about managing that as she grows, because ultimately she won't be 3 forever. She'll be, you know, she'll get older and she'll need access to more things. So, and as we mentioned before, some of these filters may, you know, when she gets to the age where she's doing homework, may restrict her. So again, reviewing those at that point to say, okay, maybe I need to remove this because she can't access, or even you can't access that, because then it's, if it's at the broadband level, it will impact you as well. Or so it's all of those things that you need to, but at the heart of it, we have step-by-step guides for all of what I've just said. You can go to the parent and control section of internetmatters.org, and within that you'll find 70 plus guides from apps, device specific, browser specific, to just make sure that it takes you through all those steps. And they're all visual, so you can see the images as you go through and just walk you through that to get that done.
Right, so nice and easy, because actually one thing I was thinking about when you were saying that is she goes to my mum's house at the weekend as well, and I'm sure she's got like a wee Amazon tablet or something, but my mum would have no idea how to do any of this stuff, and she's actually not really willing to learn because she thinks it's not important.
Right.
Just because, not from Rowan, but just in general, she's like, she would go to Asda and won't use the self scanners because she's like, well, I don't need to do that, I can just go to the checkout. So
My mum does.
she's scared of change.
My mum does exactly the same thing. She's like, I want to keep these people employed. I'm not using the machine.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, actually, I've got a difficult conversation to have there, but not with my 3-year-old, but actually with my mum about, actually, it's important you learn this stuff because you're going to have to play a part in this journey as she gets older.
Absolutely. And we do have a grandparents guide on the website as well, so you can share that with her.
There's stuff to share with her.
Yeah, there's stuff there too.
Yeah. Fun and games with parents. Hey, you're always a parent to your parent and your children now. Right, so what else? What kind of things should I be looking out for as a parent that could be a risk? So I suppose I'm thinking maybe, I know I've heard of people phoning up. When I used to work in the bank, for example, I had people phoning up and I'm like, I've just had £400 taken out of my account by Xbox. So I suppose that could be like a potential risk for people, right? So what other kind of things should parents be looking out for as risks?
Well, definitely, as mentioned, in-game spending. So if you've connected your card to your account and your child is downloading apps, and therefore in-app purchases are possible and without password protection, and that's definitely a thing to lock down as soon as possible. If you've kind of done that, if you're listening to it right now, go and do that right now, and just to prevent that. I've heard so many, as you mentioned, so many stories, personal and otherwise, that's happened to. I think the other thing to look out for is primarily when you're having the conversation and when you're seeing your child engaging, is just watching how what they're consuming is impacting their well-being. A lot of the biggest research that we've done in the last years is all about well-being research, identifying how the internet impacts children from a developmental level, from a physical level, from an emotional level. So as you as a parent, if your child is spending, you know, hours and hours gaming, and then at the end of it they're a bit grouchy or emotional or something, it's a negative, there's an element for you to kind of step in and do something there, because I think that the impact of how that's impacting them in the real world is what we as parents will see, the output of my child's been on there, now they're chucking the control over because they've it's not been a positive session, or they've watched something and then in the morning they've not slept all night because it's been, all these images have been coming up at night. So those kind of things are really important, just to watch how that interaction between what they're doing and then how that plays out in the real world, or in their world works, so that you can think about ways to either limit their time, think about what they're watching, think about their, what we call a digital diet. So from, things that they that will help them learn, things that will help them to connect, to be entertained, and then just to have chill out time, because we all need a bit of chill out time. So how that looks in terms of their digital diet, as it needs to be balanced to be able to make sure that they're it's benefiting them positively. So all of those things are things that as a parent you can do quite easily, and just to make sure that those conversations are ongoing, so you keep on top of, actually they're doing a lot more of this but less of this. Maybe I can encourage them to kind of take that down a bit and do more of that. So that's the thing I think as parents we need to start to do more of.
Yeah, got a lot of homework then, haven't I?
Yeah, sorry, but not sorry.
Detention if you don't do it.
Yes, exactly. Early is a good thing, and even if your child is not 3, 2, or at that under 10, even if they're a teenager, that is the point at which they need most of your help, because when they get to 14, 15, 16, they're going to be doing much more things that are going to put them more at risk. So don't think, oh, I've not had the conversation, I can't, they're too far gone. They're never far gone. You need to start that conversation tomorrow. So make sure that you do have it, whatever age your child is, if you've not started yet.
Awesome.
Brilliant.
Do you find, are there any specific actions parents of children who are in the LGBTQ plus community kind of need to take when setting up devices? Is there anything sort of specific down those roads?
I think when you're going to set up devices and your child is in that community, I think doing it together, so you can understand how they're using it, so that you can set whatever rules that you set around them will actually be beneficial to them in terms of the way that they're exploring what they're accessing and how they're accessing it on those particular platforms, and where they're getting trusted information. I think that's really key, that you make sure that they're actually using platforms that are where information that are trusted, rather than maybe going to forums that may not necessarily give them the right information, and doing your due diligence of working out what those are. We have a range of, as I mentioned about the resource on the website, we have a range of things that you can go on to and have a look at and see where those trusted sources are, and so you can guide them through that. So I'd say that's probably one of the key thing I would advise parents of LGBTQ plus children.
That leads me nicely into my final question. So how do parents of LGBTQ plus children balance the use of the internet as a way to connect with others in the community and kind of express themselves, but at the same time protect them from harmful content that they could encounter? And I'm sort of talking like right-wing views and all of those sort of things. How can you keep sort of that community for the LGBTQ plus children at that forefront?
I think one thing is about the platforms that you use and how you use them, because ultimately you want children to be who they are online, but with the caveat that knowing that if you're going to put yourself out there, there is the potential that there are going to be people who don't agree with you, or for whatever reason are against you, which is completely wrong. So I think just having those conversations about that and having them more frequently, because if they are willing to share their experiences, willing to put everything out there, is thinking about where they're doing that, how are they doing that, who they're doing that with. So having those conversations about who they're connecting with is really important, because if, as you say, you've got a bit more of a closed environment where you're there, you've connected with friends who are supportive towards you, who are, even some friends will fall out, so there may be challenges there too, but really just curating your channel and taking control back, not letting it be open to everybody. I think that's the key thing, is just controlling that environment and feeling that you're supported and using a platform where you're supported, rather than it being somewhere where you're just trying to grow your followers and then something happens because people are people, they're going to start saying things, because there's almost that ambiguity of not seeing someone's face when you're sending a message, and it just being easy to kind of say things that you wouldn't necessarily say face to face. So just giving that support, and just helping them to really curate those if they are on social media, create their accounts and think about how they can protect themselves in that way. Researching on communities that are going to be helpful to them to connect with others. So doing it together rather than letting them do it by themselves. I think that's the key thing, and being led by them. So if they don't want you to, step back, but just have a hand in it. But if you can do it together, I'd say that's definitely the way forward.
Yeah, that sounds really good. And again, the website, where are we going?
Internetmatters.org. Very simple. You'll find everything you need to have those conversations and to keep them going.
Amazing
That's
stuff.
great. I think I just want to say about the website as well. I spent a bit of time on it last week, and it's really good. It's really simple and straightforward to use. The content's quite easy to navigate. So make sure that you check it out, everyone, because it's really useful and
Yeah.
really helpful with everything that we've talked about on this
Yeah, it's
podcast today.
available for all levels as well. I think obviously we've all got different levels of tech, and having it that sort of that simplified approach and keeping it accessible for all age ranges, I think is spot on. Fantastic work.
Thank you.
Right, so I guess the last thing to say is a big thank you so much, Ghislaine, for coming on this call and sharing all your expertise with everyone at Sky. We
Thank
really
you so much.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
appreciate
been
the
a
opportunity.
pleasure speaking to you again. No, it's great.
Take care.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Bye.